Hello and welcome to MindShifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour, and today is Monday, March 3rd, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. From that webpage, you can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again, absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your App Store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that, before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so. You can do so by sending me an email at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@yagain.org. It's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment or some testimonial or feedback from you on the contents of the show or the work you're doing, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service. And that's just a whole lot easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. And as a complement or to that process of sending an email, you can also download the Needle app, N-E-D-L, Needle, and it's AI tuner for live radio. And once you download the app and log in, answer a couple questions, you'll have the option to either type in a comment or tap your phone icon and actually speak to us directly. So we have plenty of time today. We've got basically 55 minutes to talk, answer questions, figure out what would be most useful for you as we spend this hour together today. I've mentioned a couple of times last week, we had active participation in the group with people doing worksheets, multiple worksheets last week. And every time that happens, people come away saying that was fabulous. I get better results every time I do a worksheet in the group than I get when I'm doing it on my own, which for a lot of people seems counterintuitive because they might think that they can be more honest with themselves if they're not worried about what other people around them are thinking or saying. And there was a gentleman named Harry who used to come to the group, and somebody just asked about him recently, but he used to come to the group, and one time he was very, very honest with the group, and he said, the fact of the matter is, what I've discovered is when I do these worksheets on my own, I am not as honest as I am when I do them in the group. So for whatever his personal dynamic was, he was the opposite of what I'm describing, that he found himself not being willing to face his biggest upsets or most intense emotions or negative thoughts when he was on his own, and yet he would feel comfortable doing that in the group. So let us know what's going on for you. How can we support you? What would be of value for this next hour? It's always interesting to me how people come and go through the support groups and through the internet show, and it's gotten to be it's got quite a history now at the 14-year mark that we've finished 14 years of the internet show. And so if there's something about that process, something about uh, listening to the show, something about participating in the groups that's either of high value for you or of lower value for you, or something you've got a question about for the many tools that Michael and Jeannie offer, one of the purposes of us being here is to answer your questions. This internet show was literally begun just a little over 14 years ago with the express purpose of providing support for people who wanted to start their own MindShifter support group, and to be a resource that people could just call on a daily basis with their questions, so that if they're doing worksheets or trying to do some processing in the support group and they get stuck, or they're not quite sure how the dynamic works, they could call Michael and Jeannie and get an answer. So we're still here with that intention in mind, and we're also doing things like reading various books with commentary. And if nobody puts up a hand, I will start reading, and in about 15 or 20 minutes, if no one's put a hand up, I'll stop again and ask, and specifically ask for comments or questions. But now we're going back to the book, A Course in Miracles, When Love Becomes a Way of Life, chapter 21. Alan titles this chapter, Declare Your Independence. He writes, I used to date a woman who was a single mother of an unruly 5-year-old boy. One day when she came to visit me with her son, he ran into the kitchen, grabbed a ripe banana from the counter, peeled it, and smashed it against a window, making a mucky mess. His mother laughed, thinking he was cute. When I asked why she let him do that, she answered, I want him to feel free. Shortly afterward, I had a coaching session with my mentor, an extraordinary spiritual guide. When I asked her opinion about the banana throwing incident, she replied, but he is not free to not throw the banana. So I'll just read that again, because there's a double negative in here. The spiritual teacher said, yes, but this boy is not free to choose to not throw the banana. Most people equate freedom with the body. If I can do what I want, when I want, with my body, then I'm free. A Course in Miracles takes a different view of freedom. It teaches that true freedom is freedom of the mind. Do you want freedom of the body or of the mind? For both you cannot have. Which do you value? That's from the textbook 22. So the quote again is, do you want freedom of the body or of the mind? For you cannot have both. Which do you value? Alan writes, I used to visit a prisoner named Ray. When Ray was in college, he flew into a fit of rage and beat his girlfriend. Tragically, she died. Ray was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to many years in prison. He used his time there for spiritual studies, including A Course in Miracles. He became a model prisoner and was given high responsibility jobs. Ray was not a bad person. He had just made a terrible mistake. His heart was contrite. A few years before I met him, Ray became eligible for parole. His girlfriend's parents, who were wealthy and politically influential, mounted an annual letter-writing campaign to keep this vicious killer off the streets, and each time he was denied parole. As Ray told me this story, I realized that his body was restricted, but his soul was thriving. Meanwhile, his girlfriend's parents had the physical amenities of royalty, but they were consumed with anger and revenge. So who was really in prison and who was free? Susan Bingham, are you in the air? Hello, Susan. I have attempted to turn on the microphone for Susan Bingham, which I think is probably not an accident on Susan's part, because I think you have to actually...
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear the invitation. You blacked out sound-wise for just a moment, just probably when you were opening the phone line. Well, the latest thing you said is, how is it that you can't be free in your body and your mind both? But I wanted to comment on something else first, just to say, I love the live radio show, and most often, when it's a replay, I don't listen. I have a lot of things going on, and I don't listen to replays. And I was wondering why. Because the replays are choice podcasts, I'm sure. But for me, the idea that it's, even when we're not pushing the call button, I feel anyway that this is interactive. You are reading to us as a community, and it's a very live feeling thing. I don't know how others feel about that. So that's just a comment. The other thing was, if you could explain how we have to choose between the body and the mind to be free. I don't understand that.
Well, my take on it would be, and I'm not sure that this is exactly what the Course in Miracles is driving at, except that, especially if you put it on, if it follows right after an example like this little boy throwing a tantrum and smashing a banana on the window, and then his definition here, he says, most people equate freedom with the body in a statement like, if I can do what I want, when I want with my body, then I'm free.
Yeah.
And the implication with that is that there will not be any consequences. And if you act on impulse when, every little thing the body has an urge to do, then that's not reasonable, right? You're going to keep bumping into other people's rights and overstepping your responsibilities, etc. So that's my best guess is that if you let the urges of the body drive you, then you're you're not you're not balanced, right? You don't have the clarity of impulse control and the ability to follow your impulses. You're just like a machine or like an animal.
Okay,
That's my best guess.
So it sounds as if whoever is writing that thinks
That's
that the body.
from a Course in Miracles.
Oh, the idea then is that our bodies and minds are separate, and I don't really think of it that way. I think of one of them's interacting with the other and feeding off the other and responding to the other all the time. And okay, so yeah,
I would agree with it. I would agree with what you're saying. I mean, there's a message here that's happening that's coming from Course in Miracles, and I'm just trying to make sense of it, just like you are. I don't know exactly what Course in Miracles had in mind here. However, then he follows it up with the story of Ray, and and Ray's in prison, so his body isn't free to go wherever he wants and do whatever he wants, and yet his mind is far more free than the parents of his late girlfriend, who are, they're out there and free, but they're still so focused on him that they're not free in their mind.
Well, that's a good example. Yeah, if you're in an extreme, like I've got a very sore hip joint, and I'm thinking I can't move as much or in the ways that I'm used to. I don't demonstrate in my fitness class on one side. I just say, you do what you did on the other side, do it on that side, and I'll yell at you. So, yeah, I'm not as free, but the restrictions don't apply yet. Mentally, yeah, I'm not done in by this. It's a nuisance. I'd like to think I could heal. I'm not sure. So,
it's the not sure part that keeps you from healing. That would be what the teachings say, and what we've read a couple times in this particular book already is that a lesson or two back they were saying that if the patient absolutely said, "I will get better," then the patient doesn't even need the medicine or the doctor, etc.
That makes sense.
And the other thought I had was, especially when you're talking about it's a hip and it's only one side, it could very well be the kind of thing that Dr. John Sarno calls tension myoneural syndrome, which means it's mental emotional tension locked in the physical tissue of the muscles and the nerves.
Yeah.
And whenever it gets activated, it forces the muscles to constrict. And when they constrict, it reduces blood flow to tissue. If it reduces it by even just 10%, it's enough to initiate excruciating pain.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And so if you have, some books you can look up, what is the hip pain, what are the issues, if you have
Louise
worksheets
Hay.
you can do, if you have EFT tapping you can do, if you're, fortunate enough to find somebody who does the NET, the neuroemotional technique with the applied kinesiology muscle testing, you might be able to get at it quicker and release that tension that might be there. And it may not be the thing that's causing the pain. There might be some actual physical damage to the hip. I don't know. I don't know your physical history. And yet, unless there's been actual physical damage, then you can probably get tremendous results with this mental emotional work.
That's great. I do have a lot of mental constructs, like I'm this age, therefore I am going to have this. I got to get rid of that stuff. Yeah. Michael Ryce always says, it's all in our minds, even aging and dying. It's all in our ancestral, the cultural, habitual thought processes that are going down. You think you're going to deteriorate and become decrepit and croak. And I do believe that. I do believe that. So, yeah, worth looking at. Yeah, Louise Hay is great that way.
And, some people get really good benefits from that and some don't. And some are willing to read a book like Louise Hay, but not willing to do the emotional work that might, really cause a change. So, and it's okay. We each have our own lives to live. This isn't about judging myself as bad, good, right, or wrong. It's just, okay, if I have a discomfort, I really liked one of the things in last time we were talking to Michael Singer, or we played a Michael Singer podcast for our support group, and he talked about having just enough care and concern for your body and how you take care of it so that it's not a distraction to your spiritual work.
Right.
So you're not obsessed with the body. It's not like you're watching everything you put in the body and,
Right.
weighing all your food and making sure you get in X number of steps and beating yourself up when you don't. It's just enough so that the body doesn't become a distraction with its discomforts or pain or whatever.
That's good.
So, it's some people like to talk about it as the vehicle
Yeah.
for, your spiritual life in this physical realm.
That's a good way to look at it, I think. Useful, helpful.
And of course, as you were saying, there is no absolute separation of body from mind. It's that there are different teachings, and I believe the Way of Mastery is among them, that say that your body has manifested from within inside your mind. It's not that the mind is inside the body.
Yeah.
And of course, for those of us in the Western world, that is a real mind bender.
It's a wonderful thought, though.
Well, and there's a whole bunch of different ways in which the Way of Mastery would have us begin to stretch our belief and our comprehension so that we think more expansively of our spirit, of our mind, of our essence, of our awareness, so that we don't keep thinking of it as this small, limited thing that exists inside the confines of our cranium.
Yeah.
And what happens in an expansive experience, if you are meditating on that concept, if you're questioning that on a regular basis, my experience has been it goes beyond words in a heartbeat. The idea that I'm not just confined to the physical body.
That is a mind-blowing idea. Yeah.
And that everything that arises from this energy of mind. I don't know what other word to use. From this,
Yeah.
Michael Ryce likes to quote Max Planck or some other physicist who says, basically everything is energy, and it's energy that's been animated by an intelligence. And so nothing exists in this world without that intelligence. And your mind, what you consider your mind, your ability to be aware, your consciousness, is an aspect of that very intelligence.
God, that's great.
And so we're always creating, whether we like it or not, and we're creating based on where we point our mind energy.
Right.
And there's this woman who's an EFT master, has been for decades now. She started early on when Gary Craig created this stuff. Her name is Carol Look. And she's written a book, The Yes Code. And essentially what she's doing in the book is just another distillation of the awareness that when we are self-sabotaging, there's a reason for it somewhere. And if we can uncover the reason, then we no longer view it as sabotage. We view it as, oh, it's a good coping strategy or something that's keeping me safe from X, Y, or Z difficulty.
Right.
And or we realize, oh, I'm trying to protect myself from something that happened a long time ago and isn't happening now, and it was too much to deal with when I first encountered this as a youngster, but I don't need to have that same kind of raw, immature coping mechanism for this. I can deal with this head on directly once it becomes a conscious issue. So she has examples in her book of people who they're playing small or they're procrastinating or this, that, and the other thing. And when she does the EFT work with them, they uncover, oh, this goes back to when I was in 6th grade and I was supposed to read in front of the class and I, lost my place and fumbled and everybody made fun of me and I never recovered emotionally from that. And in one way or another, many people find that they've got dynamics like that that are driving their behavior in every circumstance. But they just don't reach the level of conscious awareness. And so we just roll with it and we say, oh, I'm having anxiety, or, oh, I've never been good at public speaking, or,
right.
oh, I'm not smart enough to have my own business, or whatever it is that I'm procrastinating from. And the limits that are set by these fears or traumas or beliefs that we carry within us seem rock solid and ironclad until they're not there anymore. And then we wonder, where did that go? How did that weight get lifted? How did I get so quickly transformed to being so much more productive? And it's, basically what she's doing is she's taking the fundamentals of coherence therapy and adding EFT tapping to it. Because coherence therapy says everything we do, we've got good reasons for doing. Even if we can't find it in our conscious logical realm, we will have an unconscious, emotionally implicit knowing about ourselves and life that makes it important for us to do whatever it is we're doing, even when we hate the results of it.
Yeah.
Whether it's, raging at somebody who doesn't deserve it, or procrastinating, or playing small, or whatever it is, if we find out what the dynamics are in our unconscious, it will make perfect sense why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
And you can get at it with EFT tapping, and you can get at it with a reality management worksheet, and you can get at it with the breath work. The biggest thing for me over the years has been I have to take an action, because actions speak louder than words. I have to take an action that will demonstrate to that fearful part of my mind that I really want to know what its content is, and I really feel very, very differently about it now than I did when I first decided to turn away from it and pretend it wasn't real, or hide it from my conscious awareness. And so the action can be something as simple as EFT tapping, or sitting down with a reality management worksheet, and then doing it again, and then doing it again, and doing it again. It's like banging the gong to reassure that fearful part of my mind that it's okay for me to have that increased self-knowledge. Like Guy Finley says, there's no such thing as bad self-knowledge. No matter how deep you dig, you're never going to uncover a bad fact about yourself. At least that's, Guy Finley's take on it. And I have to agree, because, basically what we say in the forgiveness pattern and in other places is you've already lived through it, right?
Yeah.
It can't hurt you any more than it already has. The emotions that you generate around it that get, resonated by this energy or that energy, it's just an echo of the original, and you've already lived through the original. So self-exploration with this idea of acceptance, allowance, dismantling judgments, dismantling the perceptions that result in such intense judgments is a really good idea. It's really at the core of this work. Whether it's Michael Ryce's worksheet or the EFT tapping or the coherence therapy.
There's another.
The yes code. Go ahead.
Well, there's another. I was thinking about when I was in high school, I felt very inferior in a lot of ways, embarrassed to stand out, afraid to speak up, a lot of stuff. And I had a very pleasant experience a couple of years ago when one of our classmates, one of the popular kids, announced that he was going to organize Zoom high school reunions. And I wanted to be there and see all those people and I wondered how I would feel with them now. Am I going to pop right back there and feel inferior? So we came on the Zoom and there was no facilitator. There was no one talking. And I swear to God, it's my experience talking on the radio show and the encouragement to do that, in spite of a couple of wise comments lately, but like rambling. I know I go on, and I hope you'll curb that. But in any case, so I just started saying, okay, nobody's in charge. So, Lynn, where are you and what are you up to? And we got going, and that fed on itself until at the next arranging of the Zoom meeting, this guy who organized it called me and said, I want you to be on and be the facilitator the way you were before. Just get people talking. That was so good. And I thought, I got all puffed up and proud, but I thought this is an achievement that somehow came out of the tools. I couldn't be direct about it. It's probably using all the tools, plus the fact that you and Michael have always encouraged even some of the most inane things we might say. You pick a thread out of it that might be worth something and you run with that. And it puts us back on our feet. It's very affirming. 14 years, oh, it hasn't been 14, it's been about 8 for me to be on the radio show, but it's made a huge difference in that way. And so, like Michael Bennett, who used to live here, he is now very angry with us and wrote a handwritten, carefully put together letter to me, basically telling me all the lousy things I am and did. And I read the letter and I threw it out and I thought, this isn't, he may be right about some of those things, but it's not, I'm not going to let this change how I feel about where I am now. That's his garbage. And I could put it away, more or less. Sometimes I wake in the night and I go over a few things he said, and I think maybe he's got a point there. But I've had a couple of things happen like that. And I just feel more centered and okay about being an idiot, even, for a period of time.
Well, I've always said that's the whole purpose of this radio show, is to help people feel like an idiot. Be okay.
Right. Affirm your idiocy with positive, yes, acceptance.
That's right. But I on the other side, what I have said on this, the truth that I have said on this radio show a number of times before is, while every one of us has done things that we later look back on and say, wow, that was idiotic.
Yeah.
There are no idiots. Right?
Yeah.
We are simply just beings of brilliance and light who have either yet to discover or temporarily forgotten their brilliance. And, if I get distracted, if I get triggered from some powerful dynamic of trauma energy or emotion from the past or a negative belief, I can, act in a way that I don't prefer the consequences.
Mm.
And when I look back on that, I can be really harsh with myself and say, oh, that was idiotic. And yet,
Mm-hmm.
there are no idiots.
That's good to be reminded. I don't know what it is about human nature. I'm reading Barbara Brown Taylor's book. The title is something like Walking in the Dark. She left the Episcopal priesthood for various reasons, but she talks about how she would wake in the night and all her demons would be out, hounding her about bad and stupid things she did. That seems to be a very common experience. And, we can use a tool in the middle of the night to make that less painful. But the unadulterated power of a memory that hits you in the middle of the night when your defenses are down and you're halfway between sleeping and waking, that is a thing, Dr. Tim. I'm curious about what that thing is.
The power of that thing?
Yeah, I wonder what that is.
Well, it's my experience of it for myself is how I believe, and I've been conditioned to believe the negative thoughts. And over the past 20 plus years since I've been doing Michael's work and some other work, I understand that my thoughts are just thoughts. They're not true, especially if they're false. And so I'm detaching my the importance I give to any negative thought, and I've been actively training myself to just talk back to the negative thoughts and say, okay, that's pretty silly. And the more I do that, the less they drive the bus or throw me for a loop or whatever phrase you want to use.
Yeah.
But as long as I'm conditioned and still buying into the thought that, if I have a thought, it must be valid because, it comes from a pretty good source, me, right? If I keep thinking that, then every time I have a strongly negative thought, I put myself through hell.
Mm. There's a sort of a physiological thing, though, a component to it in the middle of the night. You can wake.
Absolutely. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying I think the source of it is because we train ourselves to believe what we think. I know I've mentioned it before. One of my favorite bumper stickers ever is, don't believe everything you think.
That's good.
Because, thoughts come and go. They're as fluid. I mean, Krishnamurti would speak of this quite eloquently, that, your thoughts do not exist at the same level of reality that your body does. Or the car in front. That's why you can't just instantly make, the car miss you when it's barreling towards you. You'd like to, right? If there were any potential in your mind energy to make it not happen, you would prevent it from happening. But your thoughts are not the same level of reality as your mind. And I've used different examples before. We've all, of a certain age, we've all had experiences where we wake on a day and there's just something about how we're feeling that we feel fat. and yet, another day we wake up, we're feeling pretty good, and we didn't lose 50 pounds. But, if I catch a look at myself in the mirror and I'm in one of those bad moods and I have trained myself to believe my thoughts, and I have the thought, oh, you're hideous, etc., then I start to reap the benefit of all that programming that I've been through to believe my thoughts. And the more I work at questioning my thoughts, especially if they're negative, the less impact they have on me. And now I have the mind energy and the muscle memory for questioning everything when it's negative, so I don't wake up as much in the middle of the night in the throes of these physiological responses to the negativity. Because my mind knows it's not true. But if my mind believes it's true, I experience it as though it's true. I work with people on a regular basis who come in and they've been stuck in negative thoughts for a few days or a week or two between sessions, and they haven't disrupted it. They've been too busy with, and they come in and their body is just racked with inflammation.
Oh.
And it's mostly just because they're pouring mind energy into negativity. It's not because they ate the wrong food. It's not because, they've got leukemia or anything like that. It's just that much of our physical. This is we talked before about how the mind is not separate from the body, right? But the physical gets impacted by what we pour our mind energy into and what we believe or don't believe. So if you have the ability to get yourself on a regular basis to start questioning every negative thought, and simply, I think it was Michael Singer in one of his podcasts recently who said that Paramahansa Yogananda would tell people, every time you have a negative thought, just get in the habit of out loud stating the opposite. Because it's just as valid. Oh, you're so ugly. Oh, you're so handsome. It's just as valid. It's just a thought.
That's trickier for what I consider actualities, which in some part may not be. Like, I saw this illustration of these rows and rows and rows of crates in a field, and it turns out that these were the young, is it lambs? What are the animals that are used for veal? These young calves are kept in these enclosed, tight places so that they don't develop their muscles, and they can harvest the veal. Now, this is just really happening. And one of the topics in my mind is cruelty to animals that shows up, and there's reason for that. We've been over that, me and how I stoned those fish. It always goes back to dogfish and stingrays who were thrown on the beach by my father, and my brother and sister and I would stone them to death. And this would happen every summer for when we were very young, 7, 8, and 9 years old, and then we stopped doing it. I'm not sure how many fish were the casualties, maybe 9. It didn't happen often, but it always, I attribute my horror at the mistreatment of these present day young animals who are being just treated like crops to harvest. So cruel, and I haven't been able to pick apart the actuality of that from what I did and how to come to terms with it. There you go. There's a lot of wake-up sheets in there.
Well, there's a bottom line observation that says, if I have a negative thought about myself or someone else, or a negative emotion active in my mind, I can instantly know 3 things. The first one is it's a lie or based in a falsehood. The second one is it's an old tape playing. And the third one is if I sit and spin thinking about it, or I speak or act from it, I'm just going to make my life situation worse, not better.
Okay, 2 of those I can buy into. The first one, it's a lie.
It's a lie.
It's not a lie.
Yes, it is. Yes. The fact that it's horrible is the lie, right? The fact that it happened isn't a lie.
Okay.
But the fact of what it means is all made up. Right? Remember, we talk about how there is no such thing as a natural disaster. Right? There's just nature until there's a human being around it to judge it as bad or wrong.
Okay, so yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, this happened. You did stone these fish. Okay. Now, does that make you a bad person? Only if you make that in your mind to believe that and to mean that. Does that mean you have to be paying for that for the rest of your life? Only
Yes.
in your mind. Only in your mind.
Yeah.
Right? Your mind has decided, yes, this means because I did this, I don't have a right to be a happy, well-developed spiritual person. I have to continue to beat myself up over this.
Or to just feel pain on the behalf of the beasts who aren't alive in any position to receive an apology and a correction. I killed them. So.
Right. And so what you make it mean and what you pour your mind energy into around that meaning is what creates your experience of it, nothing else. There's nobody on the outside saying, because you did this, you're like the person in the story that Alan Cohen was just telling, that he's in prison for years because of that rage fit that ended up in the death of his girlfriend. It's not like that. There's nobody on the outside saying that you have to be tortured because you killed those fish. It's what you're making it mean and what you're doing with your mind energy that's the driving force in this.
I appreciate your sticking with me on this because it's taken you on a huge detour. But I'm thinking with the man in the prison, he paid by being in prison. So I better go to jail for a while.
No, you're paying by torturing yourself, and you've had more suffering in your life, your mental, emotional suffering over what you did to those fish than those fish ever could have sustained. Because pretty soon they were out of their misery, and you've been in your misery over it for decades. You're still torturing yourself over it. And it's okay. If you want to keep doing that, you can.
Want is a key word. Part of me must want to. I'm not aware of wanting
Part
to.
of you still feels like that's necessary, that there's some, like, I don't know exactly what your religious training was, but, for some people, we have to atone for our sins, right? We have to be punished for our...
Yep, I'm definitely from that culture.
Like the biggest one is that, we caused Jesus to die, so we have to be constantly beating our chest and saying mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, through my fault, through my most grievous fault. And you can't do that enough times. You just have to keep doing it forever.
You're right. That's true.
That's the teaching. It's not the truth. Right?
No,
it's
but
the teaching.
Right. You got it.
And it's very easy to take that teaching into the self-flagellation and abuse.
Right.
Now, some people do it at a physical level, but people like Susan Bingham just do it at the mental, emotional level. And she's still flagellating herself decades later for what she did without full awareness as a child. So just pay attention to that. You're stuck in this. This is a perspective or a lens that I ask people to put on a regular basis in therapy. I say, listen, if you're having trouble being gentle with yourself about this, that, or the other thing, imagine that you're talking to someone, your child, your niece, your nephew, a neighbor's kid, etc., who was the age you were when this happened, who feels horrible.
Yeah.
Would you be telling somebody today, if you saw a child and they were, smashing a fish's head, would you go to them and tell them, now that you've done this, your whole life is ruined. You'll never be able to be completely happy. You'll be beating yourself up over this for 60 more years. Would you tell them that?
No.
70 years.
Yeah.
Would you tell them that? The answer is no.
Yeah.
So what's the silliness in our internal dynamics that lets us do it to ourselves and think it's completely reasonable?
What is that?
It's a silliness. And it's not reasonable. And as soon
Mm.
as we wake up to it, then we can choose differently. This is why Diederik Wolzak says, just choose again.
Yeah.
He actually named his work, Choose Again.
Mm.
And in his work, he goes to, okay, now you have this situation where you have this memory, and it comes to your mind, and it's tied to this very intense negative emotion. So follow the emotion back there, see the situation, literally do the visualization that you're going to interview your younger self and ask your younger self, what did you make it mean about yourself that this situation happened?
Mm.
And then his work says, okay, so now you're clear that you made this mean that you're a horrible person and you're going to be going to hell, or that you've tortured these animals and they suffered endlessly, needlessly and endlessly at your hands,
Mm.
and that makes you a bad person and you can't ever be redeemed because the fish are gone and dead, and whatever you happen to come to believe, he says, get clear about it, and then do this little exercise where you say, okay, I'm going to be my younger self, saying, I forgive myself for believing this negative about me, and I forgive myself for forgetting that my true nature is part of this God consciousness, flow of life, etc., and that my value is internal and unchanging. Like Michael Ryce says, you have value not because you do the dishes the right way or you're a good sex partner or you make a good living. You have value because the Creator put the breath of life in you.
Mm.
It's the same fundamental observation, and I would call it wisdom, that Diederik Wolzak uses in his work.
Mm. I have this wish there had been an adult nearby who could have stopped us and reminded us that these are feeling creatures.
Right. And there was an adult there who didn't feel that way. So the fact that you have this wish, you could use that in your work and
Mm.
recognize how old I was as a child, and that I wasn't a 70 or an 80-year-old adult
Mm.
with, college and biblical training, and I was a kid
Mm.
with very limited understanding about life and relationships and mortality, et cetera, et cetera. And that animals might have feelings or that they have value themselves. You didn't know any of that. So you might be able to, recombine some of these observations, and for when you go back to do the experiential work with your younger self, and have more compassion because you understand, hey, you know what? When I was X number of years old, I didn't know anything about this stuff.
Mm.
And it can be very fruitful if you just understand that you're only experiencing the upset you're experiencing because of the beliefs you're pouring your mind energy into. You're not experiencing this because you did this to these fish. There are many people who have maimed, tortured, killed animals, some for hunting and food, some just for sport, some for out of meanness. Many people have done that, and they're not living in the internal emotional pain you're living in. The only reason you're in the pain you're in right now is because of what you're making it mean.
Mm.
And that's okay to just observe, right? You don't have to say, well, I'm wrong for doing it this way, or anybody who does it differently is wrong and I'm doing it the right way. You don't have to get into the judgment
Yeah.
game
No,
just to
that's true.
understand what the dynamic is that's causing your emotional state. And that's what we're hoping to assist people in becoming aware of. Right? We don't want to go from, okay, don't judge that way because that's wrong, but judge this way. We're saying all judgment is an error. That the flow of life is just the flow of life. And if it's happened, it's okay. And I may not like or I may not prefer the results of it, and so I might choose differently the next time if I can usher myself into a level of awareness, a new level of awareness, perhaps a more mature level of awareness. And right, the kind of the way it's locked up in your brain right now, there's no salvation for you because, as you already said, those poor fish are gone. They can't even accept my apology, et cetera, et cetera. You have it wrapped up so that there's no solution for your hell here on earth. Right? Are you still
Right.
there?
I'm still here. Yeah.
And you don't need to keep it wrapped up that way. You can open up to other possibilities. You could say that, hey, you know what? This was all part of me growing into sensitivity to me being the very empathic and loving and ready to help animals and people kind of person that I am right now. And for all I know, I may not have grown into this level of loving sensitivity if I hadn't had this negative reaction to what I did to those fish. So it's okay, and I don't have to keep pouring my mind energy into these negative conclusions about myself.
Mm.
It's powerful, and it's
Yeah.
available for you to tap into it and understand that, and just keep reminding yourself, I'm not feeling this way because I did this to these fish. I'm feeling this way because of what I'm making it mean.
Yeah.
Just try that. Write that down and read that at least twice a day for a while and see what happens. To at least start to bring that possibility into your awareness on a regular basis. Because the way you're expressing it to me, every time this comes up, your mind is telling you you feel the way you do because you did that to those fish. And since it's in the past and it can't be undone, you have the eternal fires of hell waiting for you. Oh no,
Yeah.
wait, they're burning in your chest right now.
Hmm.
And they'll be there even after you die. So just as an experiment, if you're willing to do it, write that down. I'm feeling this way because of what I made it mean when I woke up and realized at an older day, you didn't feel that way when you were doing it.
No.
You felt that way when you grew into a different level of awareness and morality and then you looked back at this and made it mean something really, really negative about yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm having this idea that I should write an opera, getting into heaven and meeting the fish. And they don't look like fish anymore, they're people. And I'm having a great time with them. I know this is getting insane.
Well, but just consider trying that exercise.
Yeah.
And if you do, I hope you're willing to share with us what it might loosen up for you.
Okay, I did write it down and I will.
Okay, well, we're out of time. Thank you for sticking around and having the call. And I'll just remind people that Michael and Jeannie are going to have a show on Podbean starting now and for the rest of the week, because Michael is busy with quantum still point or whatever he's doing. You can check that out on the whyagain.org website. And in the meantime, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Susan. Blessings. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Blessings.